Thank you for joining us today again. Could you talk about the difference between the 4th of February when this campaign held a conference and your feeling today of how it has grown?
I'm very heartened and optimistic to see such a large crowd coming out here today in support of Julian Assange. It is the sign of the time. It is basically a manifestation of the growing concerns among the general public in the Julian Assange case. People are starting to understand this is not just about him, although of course it's about his life, but it's about a much bigger issue at stake here, basically the future of press freedom. And people are starting to understand that, and slowly and gradually mainstream media is also starting to understand that their job security, the journalist security, is under attack. So I feel that this is a turning of the tides here, and from now on we will see a growing number of people basically supporting our campaign and our fight for Julian's freedom.
And we saw a lot of media here. For example, German media was there. I saw a journalist from Al Jazeera. However, my own observations, haven't seen any media, mainstream media from the US or British. Has that been your experience also? And have you tried contacting bigger representatives of the major news corporations as well?
No, I have not. I mean, I don't know. As a journalist, I don't want to get involved in trying to convince people to see a story if they don't see it, if they don't see the obvious. The media in this country, in the UK, has been very unfavorable throughout the years, although there is a notable exceptions to that. But let's hope that with the turning of the tides, which is obvious, this is a story that they cannot just keep on avoiding. It is going to be too big to avoid.
To my last question, we saw it started with a public rally, now it's becoming a movement. What are the next steps and what can people do if they're joining in at this junction?
Anything in their power to raise awareness to the seriousness of the issue. Come up to events, there are going to be growing events regularly. Send a letter to their MPs, do whatever in their power to do, and come out in the flesh, come out in force. That is always the most gratifying thing to individuals, and it is at the end of the day, it is a signal that is noticed. It is the numbers on the street. That's what politicians understand, and if you want to send a political message, turn up.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. It's a pleasure to always have you on our show.
It's always a pleasure to be with acTVism Munich.
DiEM25 is trying to bring democracy in Europe. What is the relation between Assange's case and democracy in Europe movement?
Well, without transparency, without European citizens knowing what's being decided on their behalf, behind their backs usually, there can be no democracy. We don't live in direct democracies, we live in indirect democracies. So when in Munich, in Berlin, in Paris, in London, we elect representatives. We elect them to carry our voices into the chambers where decisions are made. If we don't know what they say on our behalf and how they make decisions behind closed doors, then there's no way of keeping tabs on them. There's no way we can have democracy. So transparency, which is of course what Wikileaks has tried and succeeded in providing us to some extent, is a prerequisite for democracy. No transparency, no democracy.
You've seen the action happening behind the closed doors in Brussels. You've brought a lot of information, so you're, I would say, a whistleblower yourself. But we're seeing Chelsea Manning is languishing in prison, Edward Snowden is in exile in Russia, and now we're seeing the extradition case of Julian Assange. What would you tell people who are trying to blow the whistle? Should they not blow the whistle, or what should they do given the consequences that they face?
Look, if we do not support whistleblowers, and if we do not blow ourselves the whistles that come to our possession, then what we're effectively doing is we're surrendering. First they came for Julian, then will come for you, then they will come for our friends, then our colleagues, our neighbors. Eventually, there will be nothing to defend that's worth defending. What's life worth after that? Absolutely nothing.
You're probably going to visit Julian Assange at some point in prison or at some point in the future. What is your message to him? And also, what can you tell our viewers who want to do something about it? What can they do tomorrow?
Well, I'm visiting him tomorrow. And I can tell you that I'm visiting him with a great deal of trepidation and a sense of guilt, because I'm going to go in there and then I'm going to get out and he's going to still be in there. I will convey the spirit of defiance, the spirit of solidarity and support towards him. We had a demonstration, our party, our movement, DiEM25, Mera25 in Athens. Now, as we speak, our members of parliament were outside the British embassy. On the 10th of March, we are releasing Euroleaks, the recordings that I made during the Eurogroups of 2015, something that Julian and I have planned a long time ago. So the struggle to give people their voice and their right to know continues.
Yanis Varoufakis will be following your work going forward. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Richard, thank you for joining us today. For our young viewers in Germany, could you introduce yourself and your work?
My name is Richard Gizbert. I work for Al Jazeera English, the global English language network. I do a program called The Listening Post, and what we do on The Listening Post is we analyze media, and we do all kinds of stories related to media. Obviously, the Assange story has an essential media angle to it.
So you work for Al Jazeera. Why are you here to support Julian Assange? Because usually they say journalists have to be objective and should not take an opinion. Why is this matter of great importance to you?
You know, it's funny because I've been covering demonstrations for 40 years. I've been in the business that long. Today is the first demonstration I actually felt a part of. And I felt a little bit uncomfortable about that. Because as you mentioned, journalists are supposed to be objective. But this story is essentially about journalism. It's a field I care about. And I did 25 years of work in journalism, just on journalism, and now I cover journalism. And I don't believe there is a more important story, a bigger threat to journalism on the planet today than the Julian Assange case. And it's such a curious case, and I'm interested especially in the way young people see it. Because, you know, we watch films about journalism. They win Academy Awards, films like Spotlight. We pretend to care about journalism. We see films and adventure movies, blockbusters about government conspiracies to silence people. And young people will watch these films and they'll understand when they watch The Bourne Identity what the dynamic is. They understand about Spotlight what journalism is supposed to do. And then the Assange story happens in real life, which involves issues that are studied in films like Spotlight and The Bourne Identity, and then the kids say, well, I don't really understand the details of this, and I don't really care that much about it, and the kids, they don't engage in it the way they should, you know, and young people today, they have these things, right, which are the greatest, most powerful informational tools in the history of the planet, and too many of us use these tools to, you know, be entertained as opposed to be informed. So the information is there about this case. And it's so clear what's happening, you know, and it's funny how when we watch it in a film, we understand it. But when it happens in real life, people say of the Assange case, well, if you support Assange, does that mean you don't care about sexual assault? No, that's not what it means. And that's exactly why they chose this sexual assault case to try to bring him down. So I think it's a really important story, but I also think that this is a story that informs us about the way we are. That when this information is presented to us in a film that runs an hour and 20 minutes, we can digest it and pretend to care about it. But when it is put in front of us in our world, in real terms, we emerge confused and sometimes apathetic. And I think that's the wrong thing to do.
Richard, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Yanis, thank you for joining us today. Yesterday you were telling us that you'll go to Belmarsh Prison. Now you've come out. Tell us how you're feeling right now.
Concerned. The persecution of Julian Assange is continuing. The circumstances in which he is held in there are an affront to civilization. He spends 22 hours, sometimes more, in a cell on his own with effective sensory deprivation, without human contact. On good days, he has 30 minutes of walking in a yard where he can see a little bit of the sky for 30 minutes on a good day. Today he's not getting this. Why? Because today he was given 2 hours with me and with his father. It is astonishing that there should be such a trade-off. If he sees his father, he cannot walk for half an hour under the sky. Today, of all days, a day before the trial begins tomorrow, the court case begins tomorrow, as he was trying to gather his thoughts, 24 hours before he appears in front of the court, they chose to search his cell a long, arduous, offensive searching of his cell. For what? The whole purpose of that was to destabilize him a day before the court case. Now, this is not behavior that befits a liberal European country. Still, I maintain hope, and I cling on to the optimism that in the end there will be judges in this country that will assert their independence. I take heart from the fact that Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the opposition, asked the question during Prime Minister's question time in the House of Commons, which was very good in the sense that it exposed what is happening here. And I'm even more heartened that Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, gave a good answer. An answer that did not invoke national security or any of the pretend charges against Julian, but he spoke to the heart of the matter about civil liberties. So there is hope. And I do hope that in the end, what's happening there is going to be extinguished by the triumph of justice. And finally, if I may add another comment, I feel very sad about what the system is doing to the prison wardens in there, because these are workers, they're public servants. How do they feel being part of a system that tortures a wonderful person like Julian Assange? If you think about the prison wardens of Nelson Mandela, of all the fighters for freedom and press freedom and for all of us to have the rights that we have, their lives were poisoned by being forced by their superiors to be part of a crime against people who are fighting for everyone. The prison wardens working in there do not deserve to be put into the position of torturing on behalf of a corrupt system Julian Assange.
You were mentioning the UK government, but we are from Germany. Our government has neither denied or confirmed the existence of Nils Melzer's report. You've also had your share of experience with the German government as a finance minister, former finance minister of Greece. What are your comments on the stance of our German government, which is to completely deny nor accept Nils Melzer's report on the torture of Julian Assange?
My message to the German government is, you know that you've been bugged by the NSA. You know that Angela Merkel's phone was being tapped by the United States. You know that Donald Trump and his administration and the national security apparatus is all about splitting us up, Europeans, dividing us and ruling over us. It is about time that you look at Julian Assange's case as a golden opportunity to assert European pride in our liberal democratic traditions. I'm very impressed by the change of tide in Germany. Politicians in Germany, even from the Christian Democrats, the Social Democrats, whatever our differences might be, seem to have grasped the importance of taking a stance. So I want to commend them. I want to commend German parliamentarians from all sides of the Bundestag for being part of this. The German government should take its own first step in the direction which serves the interests of European civil liberty.
To my last question, we want to leave our viewers with solutions. So you saw, as the former finance minister of Greece, you saw how European democracy is declining. This is probably another stone to that. So how do you see the vision of future for democracy in Europe? And secondly, what is DiEM25 doing to support Julian Assange?
Well, DiEM25 has been at the forefront of supporting Julian Assange. When we were inaugurated in Berlin in February 2016, he was there on a screen from the Ecuadorian embassy. So he's part of us and we're part of him. About democracy in Europe, well, this is a very large question, is it not? But let's begin with one little step towards democracy. Transparency. Let's live stream the meetings of EU councils. Let's have minutes being taken in Eurogroup meetings. It's a small step to make, but it's exceptionally radical.
Yanis Varoufakis, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks again.
Thank you.